as we gather for prayer and celebration of the 250th anniversary of the founding of these United States. We reflect with gratitude on this historic moment for the gift of our faith and the freedom to gather and to pray and to worship without fear. With that in mind, I am thrilled to introduce our keynote speaker, Michael Knowles, an American patriot and a witness to our Catholic faith in the public square. Michael is a renowned syndicated podcaster, an author and the host of the Michael Knowles Show at the Daily Wire and the book club at PragerU. Michael also appears regularly on television, and his writing has been featured in the Daily Wire, the Claremont Review of Books, the American Conservative, the American Mind, and other outlets. He is a graduate of Yale University and lectures at universities and research institutes around the world, as well as before Congress. Though raised a Catholic, he spent time in the wilderness of atheism before returning to fully embrace the beauty of Christ and his church. Today, he is defending it and pronouncing it for all to hear. Michael is inspiring for numerous reasons. In addition to his thought-provoking commentary and engaging style, he is a witness to our faith and the beauty of marriage and family life, and encouraging young men to get married and embrace the beauty of family life as he has. In addition, Michael is also a courageous defender of religious freedom and persecuted Christians, a cause close to our hearts. Unlike many journalists, he has been at the forefront of exposing where Christ and the church are persecuted, from Armenia to Nigeria. Ladies and gentlemen, be prepared to be inspired by the vision and contributions of our Catholic forebears as Michael Knowles presents the most Republican and the most Democrat of America's Catholic roots. Please welcome Michael Knowles.
Thank you very, very much. It is a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. I am delighted to be back at the National Catholic Prayer Breakfast, especially as we celebrate the 250th anniversary of our country. The Founding Fathers would probably scratch their heads at the notion of a Catholic prayer breakfast in our nation's capital. Some of my own ancestors arrived on these shores in the very beginning. They sailed on the Mayflower, they fought in the Revolution, and I am certain that they are spinning in their graves as their papist descendant addresses a room full of mackerel snappers in the nation's capital. Our early American forebears wrote constantly of their faith in Providence. The Declaration of Independence concludes by professing, quote, a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence. And yet, I know that this popish turn of events would have raised some 18th century eyebrows. Arthur Schlesinger Sr. famously regarded anti-Catholicism as the deepest bias in the history of the American people. This nation was, after all, founded by men who felt that Henry VIII had not gone nearly far enough. Over the course of our history, legislators have banned Catholics from holding public office. The Know-Nothings took over state houses and the leadership of Congress. Al Smith lost. Kennedy barely won, and I think we can all admit he probably stole Illinois. So that one, I don't even know if you can count it. Yet today, if you count vice presidents and first ladies, we have now had baptized Catholics in the White House for 17 consecutive years. What a surprise it must be to the ardent Calvinists who settled our country that America would come not only to tolerate Catholics, not only to appreciate the contributions of Catholics, but even to elect them. On this 250th anniversary of our country, I would, at the risk of extravagance, go even further to observe America's intrinsically Catholic character. If the claim sounds outrageous, please do not blame me. A man with greater authority than I made it first. That would be Alexis de Tocqueville, the most insightful and influential analyst of the American political order, who foresaw all the way back in 1831 that over time, the overwhelmingly Protestant Americans would trend in two directions when it came to religion. Some relinquishing Christianity entirely, in Tocqueville's words, and others returning to the bosom of the Church of Rome. Hard to argue with that. Keep in mind, Tocqueville made that prediction years before mass migration from Ireland and Germany inflated our Roman numerals in the fledgling United States. Tocqueville based his prediction not on demographic trends, but on America's very nature. Despite all appearances, all protestations to the contrary, Tocqueville saw Catholicism as bound to take hold, primarily because America was democratic. America is the most democratic country in the world, Tocqueville wrote, and men living in democratic ages are therefore very prone to shake off all religious authority. Now, at first glance, aversion to authority does not seem to bode well for a religion that submits to a supreme pontiff. However, Tocqueville observed that in such an age, if men do choose to submit themselves to religious authority, they choose at least that it should be single and uniform. In Catholicism, there is a distinction between clerics and laity, but as far as the laity is concerned, everyone is equal. This simultaneously secularizing and Catholicizing pressure of democracy creates a paradoxical catechesis. Roman Catholics, Tocqueville noted, are seen to lapse into infidelity, and Protestants to be converted to Roman Catholicism. You gain some, you lose some. If you did not know that Monsieur Tocqueville drew his conclusions from first-hand experience 2 centuries ago, you might think that he took his data from the pages of Pew Research, according to which Protestant identification today continues to decline, and cradle Catholics, sadly, continue to fall away, but adult conversions to the faith are only growing. Contrary to recurrent anti-Catholic smears of dual loyalty, Tocqueville believed that Catholics in the United States were not only the most Republican and the most democratic class of citizens which exists, but also, at the same time, the most faithful believers and the most zealous citizens. Not only did their faith not undermine Catholic citizenship, it actually encouraged it. Because Catholics' natural fitness for America ran deeper than mere democracy. As Professor Berzer has already observed, the Jesuits smuggled the teachings of the Thomists to Thomas Jefferson. And inclined as I am to criticize the Jesuits, we have to admit they're a clever bunch and they get results. It's very impressive. Looking beyond the Thomists to St. Thomas Aquinas himself, I am consistently struck by how familiar his description of the ideal regime appears. In the Summa Theologiae, Prima Secundae, question 105, St. Thomas described the ideal regime as a mixed regime, quote, being partly kingdom, since there is one at the head of all, partly aristocracy, insofar as a number of persons are set in authority, and partly democracy, that is, government of the people, by the people, insofar as the rulers can be chosen from the people, and the people have the right to choose their rulers. Such, St. Thomas observed, was the form of government established by the divine law. Not only was it the form established by the divine law, but if you squint just a little bit, it is the form established by the framers of our Constitution. The regal executive, the aristocratic Senate and judiciary, the democratic House of Representatives. The whole framework bears a striking resemblance to St. Thomas's ideal regime. In fact, I can think of no closer parallel among any of the governments of the world today. Perhaps that is why Orestes Brownson noted that Catholics are better fitted by their religion to comprehend the real character of the American Constitution than any other class of Americans. Even the way in which our founding fathers brought about government seems to spring from the pages of the Catholic Church's common doctor. In the Secunda Secundae, question 42, St. Thomas teaches that revolution can indeed be justified under certain circumstances. In his work on kingship, St. Thomas outlined just how and when. He wrote, "If there be not an excess of tyranny, it is more expedient to tolerate the milder tyranny for a while than, by acting against the tyrant, to become involved in many perils more grievous than the tyranny itself." In other words, most of the time, you should stick with the devil politician you know over the devil politician you don't. Almost precisely 500 years later, Thomas Jefferson said the very same thing in the Declaration of Independence. "Prudence indeed," Jefferson wrote, "will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes. Accordingly, all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed." When tyranny finally did reach an insufferable excess, how did the Americans proceed? Did they whip up the mob into a murderous frenzy, as occurred in the liberal French Revolution, or the communist Russian Revolution, or even the voodoo Haitian Revolution? No. Sam Adams got a little bit rowdy at the Boston Tea Party, we can acknowledge, but by and large, the American Revolution proceeded in an orderly way, thanks entirely to its following the Catholic principle of subsidiarity. That is, it was conducted, in Aquinas' words, not through the private presumption of a few, but rather by public authority. The leaders of the revolution, the founding fathers, were men who had already been entrusted with public authority. They were legislators, they were judges. Not many were Catholic by profession, and yet, in retrospect, a distinctly Catholic character begins to appear. This impression is not illusory. It's not just wishful thinking in a room of 1,500 Catholics. We know a tree by its fruit. Catholics today make up a little over 20% of the U.S. population, but we make up 28% of congressmen, 38% of governors, and at least 2/3 of the Supreme Court. We will hit 78% of the Supreme Court whenever we drag Justice Gorsuch back across the Tiber. It's not, the water is warm, Mr. Justice, whenever you want to come back. Not only is the sitting Vice President Catholic, but every presently viable candidate for president in 2028 of both parties is a baptized Catholic. Few of our forefathers could have predicted it. Only a firm faith in Providence could have permitted it, and yet here we find ourselves, a quarter millennium later, a people and a place so improbably and perfectly suited for each other that not only can a Catholic become president, but an American can even be the Pope. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much.